and hearing is the Yamaha QY70, a portable MIDI workstation from 1997 with 500 different instruments inside, 16 tracks of MIDI sequencing, a whole tracker-style song editor, a hilariously non-backlit screen, and best of all, it runs on 6 AA batteries. The ancestral lineage of the OP1, the Novation circuit, the Electron Dig Attack, all of these cool standalone workstations go back decades. Some would even say a century or two. But Yamaha really put out some contenders 20-something years ago with this series, from the QY30, which is a tiny little guy, all the way up to the QY700, which is just this massive MIDI battle station. These little MIDI guys could really cook up whole 16-track arrangements, which means you could power a studio full of instruments using this tiny guy as the brain, or you could just bring it to a cafe and cook up some dope 90s style beats, you know, whatever you want. The thing is, it's the year 2022. This thing is over 25 years old, and music gear evolves really quickly. We didn't have the same luxuries we had back then. Now we have big, bright visual sequencers, velocity-sensitive pads, multiple knobs and encoders. This thing really is starting to show its age. But there's a few things we can do to bring it up to speed. Now, I love this thing, and it has unlocked so much creative potential in me, and I would love to be the one to share it with a new generation of musicians. So, if you're a lo-fi beatmaker coming from the sampling world, you know, SP404s and the like, or if you want to add a couple of tracks to your standalone MIDI setup with synthesizers and whatnot, or, you know, if you just want to rescore Lego Island for Windows 95, you know, let me show you how this thing can be used in a more modern and contemporary way. So what we're going to do is we're going to combine the Yamaha QY70 with some modern music technology, particularly a standalone sequencer and MIDI controller. In this case, the Launchpad Pro Mark III from Novation. This way, we can make a beat much more easily than using this thing on its own. We'll be using this as sort of the voice machine, and this as the controller. Let's begin by connecting these devices. First off, power. I've powered the Yamaha QY70 by DC, but you can also use AA batteries if you're out on the go. Works great. The latest Launchpad from Novation, the Pro Mark III, is the first one to be standalone, so we do not need to connect this to a computer. This one operates entirely on its own, which means without a computer we can use these two devices together. So you could power this one off AA batteries, and you could power this one off of a power bank, but for now, for the sake of shooting a video, I've got these both plugged into the wall. Now all the audio is being generated by the QY70, which is through a 3.5mm standard aux cable here. The Launchpad does not produce any audio, it's just sending MIDI data, so the only other connection we have is this MIDI cable here. The QY70 accepts a standard 5-pin MIDI DIN, and the Launchpad Pro has a 3.5mm MIDI jack here. It's got 3, in, out 1, and out 2. So to connect these devices, all we need is like a MIDI cable and the little dongle going out of the Launchpad into the QY70. And then we're basically set. So if you're not too familiar with how MIDI works, then let me explain the basics. MIDI basically carries 16 channels of note information. The QY70 can send and receive these 16 channels, as can the Launchpad. The 16 channels, for example, are displayed here. On the Launchpad sequencer, we can sequence 4 channels of MIDI at one time. You can see the 16 channels are down here, but we can control 4 at once. So if I play on channel 1, then I get the first instrument. If I play on channel 2, I get the second instrument, and so on, and so forth. So if you don't have a MIDI sequencer and you want to follow along, you can totally use your DAW for this. What you need is a way to connect your computer to MIDI. Now, a lot of audio interfaces have a MIDI port built onto the back of it. For example, almost all of the Focusrites have that 5-pin MIDI right on the back. And you would just take the MIDI cable from your QY70, plug it into the MIDI out of your interface, plug that into QY70 MIDI in, and then each of the tracks inside of your DAW could be programmed to run audio out of this thing. You're basically replacing the internal instruments of your DAW of choice with the hilariously MIDI sounds of this thing. So you can totally follow along if you have that MIDI connection. So just a quick disclaimer for those watching this video. This thing is 25 years old, and it's like an OG Game Boy. It doesn't have a backlight for the screen, which makes it so hard to film. It makes it so hard to make the screen visible on camera. So if you're buying this thing for Instagram videos, like, good luck. Like, I'm a professional video producer, and this thing trumps me. You might be saying, like, hey, Justin, clean your screen. But the thing is, I did. I bought this thing secondhand for like 30 bucks because it was broken. The pads were not working. They need to be pressed really hard, which means the internals just need to be fixed up and replaced. So I scrubbed down the PCB, I replaced the rubber pads and whatnot, and the screen was just like dissolving, right? The screen was just not holding out very well. And no matter how much I clean it, no matter what I use, I just can't get it to be any better without just straight up replacing the plastic, which I'm afraid to do. So I'm sorry, this is the clearest I can get it for the sake of this video. My bad. I'll see what I can do. Any suggestions, hit me in the comments. Okay, so here's our setup. This is kind of the best I can do. Sorry. I'd love to go through all the instruments in depth, but there's just so damn many of them, so I can't cover them all. So let me just tear through the categories real quick. Now, before you listen to these sounds and think like, oh god, they're so 90s sounding and terrible, just bear with me, because we're going to actually mod the sounds a little bit and add some effects so we can make them sound a bit more modern. So just listen to these sounds and trust me, they are going to sound better. It sorts the instruments by categories, and it starts off with the pianos. First are some classic grand pianos. You've got some sparkling ones. You've got these classic electric pianos here. Some of the electric pianos don't actually sound all that bad. I use these the most, I think. Not to mention you got a couple harpsichords in here. And clavichords. Okay, after your PF, which is piano section, you've got your CP, which is chromatic percussion, right? You've got your celestas. Glockenspiels, you got a couple music boxes. These always sound really nice. You got some really cool vibes and marimbas. You have a couple of struck strings, like dulcimers, if you're into that. After the chromatic percussion, you got OR, which is organ. There are so many organs in this thing. My God. I don't know what the demand for organs was back in the day, but there's a whole lot of them. And after organ is guitar. There's even more guitar sounds. There's nothing more like MIDI sounding to me than guitar, so I avoid these almost altogether. But some of the tones are kind of neat, and I'm sure you could kind of mess with them if you find that interesting. After guitar, naturally, is bass. Bring down the octave here. You've got all sorts of like acoustic and electric basses. And you also have like analog electric basses, which are super fun. Okay, after BA is ST for strings. Now, I don't know why the timpani is inside of the string section, but, you know. I think this is just generally orchestral sounding things. Now, EN, that's for the ensemble, right? This is a combination of multiple instruments, mainly violins, violas, strings, and often combined with brass instruments or woodwinds. Now, I don't feel the same way about MIDI strings as I do about guitar. I think that MIDI sounding strings can actually sound pretty good if you put the time in, and especially if it's legato with a really slow attack. You can make some really cool sounding stuff. After ensemble, you've got the BR brass section. Again, you know, cool textures. I don't think playing this anyone will ever think you're actually playing a French horn, but it is a pretty cool sounding, like, rumpled synth thing. RD for reed instruments. A couple terrible sounding saxes and the like. Honestly, the oboe sound, though, like, I mess with that. That's a good one. Okay, PIs, pipes, which are like flutes and such. I use this whistle on almost every song because it sounds like Lord of the Rings, like animated series. These are really, really, really fun, and I could use this for just the pipe sounds alone. LD. Now we're starting to get into the 90s here. So these are lead synths, and lead is a very broad term. It basically just means any kind of synthesizer that could be used to play a melody, which is most of them, right? Sometimes you have pads, sometimes you have like bass synth, but leads are very open and can really mean anything. Some are much shorter and would be great for sequencing. This one's just called Seq Anag, which I guess means like an analog sequencer. Kind of plucky, right? There's a lead synth for everything, really. Okay, pads. Pads are a different type of synth, which are generally a bit more long and sustained, and these form mostly chords and sort of, you know, backing components like that would fit behind your lead. Needless to say, I use the pads a lot. They're great for ambient music, and you always need a pad in whatever it is you do. And then there's this amalgamous section called FX, which are just, I guess, everything that doesn't fit into the other categories. Everything from like rain to some percussion-y things. Glockenspiel, like I feel like that's supposed to be in the tune percussion section. Hilarious, that's a chorus and a bell, just combined for whatever reason. You got a lot of bells here. On one hand, this section kind of pisses me off because it's just there's so many different kind of sounds right next to each other, which makes it really hard to browse. But on the other hand, some of the coolest sounds on this thing are stuck inside of this FX section. So why they decided to name it FX and just have this giant section wedged into the middle of the device, you know, your guess is as good as mine. Okay, and then you've got this sort of like microaggressive ethnic section here, which is like sitar. You know, you got your good old American banjo, ouds, shamisen. Basically any instrument that doesn't fit into your Western-centric idea of what an instrument should be, it fits into the ethnic section here. But don't get me wrong, some of them sound great. Like this kalimba is pretty dope. Then you've got PC, which is percussion, which is all sorts of bells. Now, interestingly, some of these percussions aren't really tuned all that well. So no matter what MIDI note you play, it doesn't necessarily play a note, which makes sense. You know, you don't have every single note on a wood block, right? So if you want one MIDI track just for your tom, then you can absolutely do that on this device. Now, if all of those instruments aren't enough for you, my boy, we've still got one more section left, which is sound effects. Not to be confused with the FX section, but it's really just a bunch of sound effects. Now, I had a keyboard when I was a kid that made these exact MIDI sounds, which is just kind of blowing my mind at the moment. Thank you, thank you. So, you know, if you're creative, you could use some of these for some sound design. I'm sure they would totally come in handy to flush out a track that was just instruments. Shower, you know, doesn't sound bad. You've got your occasional thunder. Like, could definitely be better, but, you know. Okay, and at the very end of this cacophonous list of instruments, you finally have your drum kits. So there's actually a couple different kits here, which is interesting. You've got your standard kit, you've got a bright kit, room, dark room, rock and roll, electric kit, analog 2 kit, dance. You've even got a couple of sound effects drum kits here. You got a whole bunch. And I looked it up in the manual, and there's only like, I think 4 or 5 kits, and the other kits are just variations of those same kits that offer different sounds based on what it is you're trying to do. So you can just pick one kit and run with it. There's a whole mess of slots in each drum kit. So it's just like an Ableton 64 slot kit, right? There's a whole bunch of drums you can play at one time. It's just a matter of if you can use all those different sounds and if they sound half good. The important bit is that you can sequence 16 instruments in each project, or 32 voices at once. That's crazy. If you're determined enough, you could like graduate from beat making and synthwave and stuff and just start arranging entire symphonies using this thing to sequence it all. So if you find you want to use a bunch of instruments at once, definitely consider this thing. So what we're going to do for the sake of this video is we're going to stick to 4. Just 4 tracks at one time. And then we're going to play a lead on the 5th track. Let's start off with the drum kit. So I'm going to use this well-named hip-hop kit, right? Let's do that standard lo-fi shuffle thing. Not bad. Easy enough. Now, drums are a little bit harder to mess around with in this device. The other sounds, as I'll show you, you get to mold, but these are kind of stuck. So if it was me, I would throw it through the SB404 and put a filter on it and such. But I think for now, at least we have a beat to work on. So sequencer number 1 is in channel number 1. Okay, if I move over to sequencer number 2, if you look on the QY70, we have our second voice here. So let's come up with something kind of unique. Let's make something that's originally quite MIDI sounding and make it sound a bit more like good. So I've started so many songs in this thing just by landing on a random instrument. So let's start off with a sound that actually sounds good, so we don't have to mold it too much. I like this one called Night because it sounds like two synths at once. There's this sort of reed sounding, and then there's that weird little thing on top of it, which I guess is meant to sound like a cricket, right? Let's start off with a sound like that. All right, I'm gonna make that pattern just a little bit longer here, and I'll play these two together. All right, so we got a little something. It's not the best sounding thing in the world, but let's add a little bit to it and see what we can come up with. Inside of the QY70, I'm going to go to our third one here, and let's see if we can find something and then morph it a little bit. You know, I said I'm not a fan of organs, but this is a good chance to try something new. This device is not a synthesizer. It doesn't generate sounds like a synthesizer would. However, it is what we call a rompler. A rompler uses pre-recorded sounds, and then you have a very minor amount of control over them, namely ADSR. And ADSR is a means of morphing your sound so it sounds a little bit less terrible. So I'm going to go into the voice edit here by pressing menu, voice edit, and here we have two types of control. We have a low pass filter. Already sounds pretty cool. It even has resonance, which I don't think we're going to use. Yeah, no thank you. And then here we have our ADSR, which is attack, decay, sustain, release. For example, if I were to lower the attack, now it's got that sort of slow gear, as we call it. It goes in real nice and slow. And similarly, I'm going to up the release time so it doesn't just cut off so suddenly. Cool, now we have something that sounds a little bit more interesting. It's, you know, it came a long way from that just organy sound. Let's see what we can come up with. So because of the filter, it ended up being a little quiet. So of course, the QY70 has its own little mixer inside of it. And it's adorable because it's animated. You see, it's got the little sliders there. It's got the little pan and effect sends and whatnot. So let's take that third sound. Let's make it nice and loud. Let's give it a try. Not bad, you know, for a lot of beat makers that might be a bit too muddled, but I think for an ambient sound, this on its own is a real pretty. There's some cool stuff happening there. Alright, so what we're going to do for the fourth sound here is we're going to take a sound from the ethnic section here, this shamisen, and we're going to put it through our effects matrix. So there's 3 effect slots on the QY70. We've got reverb, chorus, and a variable slot. Hello, Kiwi. So what we're going to do... Oh, you want this, huh? Okay. Take this. So we're going to start off by taking this sound, which is in slot 4, and then if we go into menu and go into effect send, you can see the 3 effects here: reverb, chorus, and variable. So if I were to pump this through... Oh, it's already reverb maxed out here. So this is the reverb. And we can even edit these effects too. If we go in through the menu a couple times, here's our 3 effects. We've got a hall reverb, a chorus, and a delay. So I'm going to go into the reverb edit here. I'm going to take the reverb time and bring that all the way up to 30. We can even change the type. Tunnel. Let's try a tunnel. You even have a high-pass filter cutoff and a low-pass filter cutoff. I mean, this is, you know, it may not be the best-sounding reverb out there, but you've got basement, tunnel, white room. Let's see how white room sounds. It's really not bad. Let's get something a bit more practical. Let's get like a stage, again, with a 30-second... Now, I don't hear 30 seconds to reverb there, but we just want to max this out to give it that sort of ambient feel. All right. And now, let's put it through some of the other effects here. We've got a chorus, okay? Now, a chorus may not be too much because it's going to be, you know, it's a short sound. But if we were to crank up the chorus here... Okay. And let's turn on our variable effects. It starts off with a delay. So if we go into our effect window back here, we can change that delay to something else if we go to variable edit here. Now, you have a whole mess of effects, okay? We have all of the same reverbs as the reverb slots here. Room, room, stage, stage, plate. Then we have a couple different delays. Got an echo. We have an ERI, which is some kind of delay. Oh, that sounds kind of like a reverb, my bad. You have a gate reverb, a reverse gate. You have a couple karaoke slots. I don't really know what that entails. You've got 3 karaoke, you've got a through, which just means, I guess that's just playing. You have all the same choruses. You have Celeste, which is like a different kind of chorus there. Flangers. Symphonic, a rotary, which sounds really nice. Tremolo, my bad. Autopan, phaser, distortion. Now, the QY70's bigger brother, the QY100, actually has audio in. So you could plug in your SP404 or your guitar or whatever and put it through this terrible overdrive. You know, if you're into lo-fi overdrive, overdriven Japanese plucked instruments, yeah, go for it. All you. Amp sims, even got a 3-band EQ. It's got the isolator from the SP404. You know, you have all these different effects. You get to pick one as your effect slot. Auto wah, if that's your thing. So I'm just gonna put it through another layer of reverb so we can get something kind of ambient-y. This instrument has a really sharp attack, which, you know, we could fight off with a little bit of ADSR, but for now, we got something with a little bit of substance there, and now you can hear that really long reverb. So, channel 5, go to note mode here, note mode, channel 5, great. That gives us access to our 5th instrument, which is a lead, great. So hopefully you can see a little bit of what's possible. I'm just going to really quickly show you 1 or 2 sets that I've already prepared, because improvising a song on video is really hard to make it sound good. So you can already hear that same technique of using the attack to really take an instrument which is quite MIDI sounding and give it a bit more life. There's a little bit of MIDI sequencing going, right? Now the drums aren't that great sounding, so I try to use some simpler sounds whenever I can. Skip forward a little bit. Now I found in this drum kit there's those cool little organic percussion things. So I built the song kind of around those. Right, not bad. There's some good stuff in here, you know? And of course you can go in and let's pull up another one. You can name your songs, you can organize your songs, you can even record the MIDI into the device, and then that way you wouldn't even need the external sequencer. I'm just, you know, showing you how I made it. All right, Pico. That's in track number 5 here. Let's give it a go. This is kind of cute, right? Uses a lot of cute kind of instruments. There's that flute. This is a little bouncy, right? you know, the percussion does go a long way. So it's up to you to decide if this is too MIDI for your liking, or if you think you can put this through some, you know, through just enough effects or sample it. But I think that this thing can really go the distance and can really provide you with a whole palette of sounds you may not have had access before. Right now, these are still pretty cheap. You know, this doesn't have the lo-fi appeal of a lot of the old MPCs and synths and stuff that have just skyrocketed in price. You can still find these kicking around. These were by no means a rare device. When they came out. These were quite popular. Bjork carried one with her everywhere, and you can still find them at a reasonable price. Even after this video, I'm not popular enough of a YouTuber to really bring this to the main stage. But if you can find one, pick them up. If it's a little broken like mine was, then you know, you have a chance at getting it fixed up. I hope the QY70s that are still out there floating around on eBay or YouTube find some good homes after this. And as per our last video, if you make anything with one of these, please send it our way. Looking forward to seeing more. So, thanks for watching.